The hum of the elevator stopped so suddenly that Nathan thought for a second it was just his imagination. Then the lights flickered, dipping into a dim orange glow that made the small space feel even smaller. Outside, rain hammered against the building like handfuls of gravel tossed from the sky. He shifted the grocery bag in his arm and looked at the woman who had stepped in moments earlier. She was calm on the surface, but her fingers tapped the strap of her purse like they were keeping a secret rhythm. Somewhere above, a low groan ran through the elevator cables. She said, "If we do not get out tonight," and let the words fade. Nathan replied, "Then I am staying in." He had no idea then just how long that night would feel. Welcome to today's story, a journey filled with emotions, unexpected turns, and lessons worth keeping. If you enjoy stories that touch the heart and make you think, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let us begin. The summer storm had rolled in without warning, turning the sky into a restless sea of gray. By the time Nathan Pierce left the corner market, the rain was falling so hard it blurred the streetlights into hazy halos. His sneakers slapped against wet pavement as he crossed to his apartment building, grocery bags swinging from one arm, the smell of rain-soaked concrete rising with every step. Inside the lobby, the air felt warmer, heavier, like the humidity had followed him indoors. He shook the water from his hair and headed for the elevator, pressing the worn brass button with his elbow while shifting his groceries. The hum of machinery above was faint but steady. When the doors slid open, he stepped inside, already thinking about dinner. The 8th floor button lit under his thumb, and the elevator began its slow, mechanical climb. At the 7th floor, the doors opened again. Margaret Hayes stepped inside. Nathan knew her only in passing, an upstairs neighbor he had seen now and then, always in neatly pressed clothes, her stride brisk, her expression unreadable. Tonight, she wore a dark green dress that matched her eyes, the fabric catching the dim light like a shadowed emerald. Her hair was pinned loosely at the back, a style that looked accidental and deliberate all at once. They exchanged the kind of polite nod that neighbors give when they recognize each other, but have nothing else to say. Margaret pressed the 8th floor button again, even though it was already glowing. The elevator hummed, the doors closed, and for a few moments the ride was uneventful. Then, without warning, everything stopped. The hum died instantly. The floor seemed to tilt just enough to make Nathan's stomach lurch. The lights flickered, off, on, then settling into a dim orange emergency glow. In that sudden quiet, the storm outside sounded louder, the steady pounding of rain on the roof echoing down the shaft. Nathan glanced at the control panel. Every button looked dead. He pressed the door-open key, out of habit, but nothing happened. Margaret tried the same, her fingertip tapping twice before she let her hand drop. She said, in a voice calm enough to be rehearsed, "Well, this is interesting." Her composure was the kind that could make a crisis feel like an inconvenience. But Nathan noticed the subtle movement of her fingers on the strap of her purse, a quiet, repetitive tapping like she was keeping herself occupied. He pressed the intercom button, hoping for a building manager or a scratchy voice on the other end. All he got was static. He looked at her and shrugged. "Looks like we are not going anywhere for a while." Margaret's lips curved into a faint, amused smile. "If we do not get out tonight?" She let the sentence trail away, the rest swallowed by the low rumble of thunder. Nathan leaned back against the railing. "Then I am staying in," he said, the words leaving his mouth before he had time to think about them. That earned a small laugh from her, low, warm, genuine. It made the space feel a little less claustrophobic. The elevator swayed gently, probably from the wind outside, but it was enough to make both of them shift their stance. For a while, they stood in silence, listening to the storm. The rain pounded the building in relentless sheets, and somewhere far above, the steel cables groaned against their pulleys. Margaret spoke again, her voice steady but curious. "How long do you think it will take them to fix this?" Nathan shrugged. "Could be 30 minutes. Could be all night. Power outages during storms like this are not exactly rare." She inhaled slowly, her eyes scanning the confined space. All night in here, that would be new. There was something in her tone that caught his attention. Not fear, exactly. More like curiosity. Nathan adjusted the grocery bag at his feet, kneeling to open it. "Could be worse," he said. "We have light, we have company." He held up a loaf of fresh bread and a block of cheese. "And we have dinner." She smiled again, softer this time, leaning against the opposite wall. "You are remarkably calm about this. Panicking will not make the elevator move," Nathan replied. "Might as well enjoy the company while I have it." Her posture eased slightly, one hand resting on the railing as the orange light cast soft shadows across her face. The air felt warmer than before. Not from the temperature, but from the slow shift in the space between them. Margaret asked about his floor, his job, how long he had lived in the building. The conversation began like any small talk, but the edges of formality wore away quickly. He learned she worked from home as a designer, had moved in after her divorce 2 years earlier, and kept unusual hours. "You probably hear me walking around at night," she said with a faint smile. "I am on a different schedule than most people." Nathan nodded. "I have heard footsteps. Did not know they belonged to you." Outside, the storm roared louder, the sound pressing against the walls of their small metal box. The elevator shuddered slightly, and Margaret's hand tightened briefly on the railing. Nathan noticed, and without comment, shifted the subject to lighter ground. He asked about her favorite coffee shops in the city, and she countered with questions about his hobbies. The emergency light overhead buzzed faintly, a reminder of the fragile systems keeping them from complete darkness. Midway through their back and forth, Nathan felt the first stirrings of something unusual. This was not the polite, efficient exchange of neighbors in passing. It was slower, warmer, carrying the quiet weight of people who had no reason to rush. But what happened next would make the night feel far longer than either of them expected. The storm outside showed no sign of letting up. The thunder rolled in deep, vibrating waves, and the rain struck the building in bursts like someone shaking a sheet of metal. Inside the elevator, the sound was muffled but constant, a low roar beneath their voices. Nathan sat his grocery bag down near the corner, shifting to lean more comfortably against the wall. Margaret mirrored him on the opposite side, her eyes occasionally flicking toward the elevator doors, as if they might spring open at any second. But they did not. He broke off a piece of bread, offered it across the narrow space, and she accepted with a quiet, "Thank you." She took a bite without hesitation, chewing slowly as if savoring something more than the taste. Nathan opened the cheese, cutting a small slice with the plastic knife from his bag, and handed it to her. The faint smell of the cheddar mingled with the warm, slightly metallic scent of the confined space. "You know," she said after a moment, "this might be the first time in years I have eaten without looking at a screen." "Glad I could help," Nathan replied. The conversation drifted. She told him about her work, graphic design for small businesses, mostly logos and websites. She liked the freedom, but hated the way clients assumed she was always available. Nathan told her about the years he had spent moving from job to job before settling here, how he preferred fixing things with his hands to sitting at a desk. There was a lull. The only sound was the rain. the occasional hum of the backup light overhead. Margaret's gaze lingered on him a moment too long before she looked away. "If we do not get out tonight," she said again, softer this time, "I am not sure I would mind." Nathan let the words settle before answering. "Neither would I." A flicker of curiosity passed over her features, but she did not press the point. She shifted, leaning her shoulder against the wall, her hair loosening slightly from its pin. The dim light softened her face, and for a moment, Nathan forgot about the space they were trapped in. Outside, a sharp crack of thunder jolted the elevator. Margaret's hand gripped the railing, and Nathan could see the brief unease in her eyes. Without thinking, he said, "Could be worse. We could be stuck without light." She gave a short laugh, but the tension in her hand eased. Halfway through the hour, their conversation deepened. She spoke about her divorce, not bitterly, but with a quiet, measured honesty. "Two people can share the same space," she said, "and still become strangers without realizing it." Nathan listened, resisting the urge to fill the silence. "Sometimes you wake up and realize the person you have been with for years is just someone you know," she continued, "not someone you love." Nathan wanted to offer something about his own past, but instead he said simply, "I am sorry." She studied him, as if deciding whether to believe the sincerity in his voice, then gave a small nod. "It is all right. I am not sorry anymore." Another rumble of thunder rolled through, the elevator swaying just slightly. Margaret shifted the topic, asking about his favorite places in the city. They traded stories, his about a hidden bookstore downtown, hers about a small cafe that made the best cinnamon rolls in the Midwest. The elevator felt warmer now, though the air conditioner had gone silent long ago. Nathan noticed how their silences had changed. At first, they had been polite pauses between words. Now they were filled with an unspoken understanding, a shared awareness that they were both letting the night stretch a little longer than necessary. But the next thing she said would shift the entire tone. She asked, "Do you ever think about what you would say to someone if you knew it was the last time you would see them?" Nathan hesitated. "Sure," he said finally. "I think everyone does." "Exactly," she replied. "But most people never say it when they should." Their eyes met again, holding just a beat longer than before. There was a weight to the moment, like something unsaid was pressing at the edges of their conversation. Another half hour passed in that quiet rhythm of talking, pausing, listening. At one point, the emergency light dimmed, and both of them instinctively looked up. Margaret's hand brushed the wall beside her as if to ground herself, and Nathan took a small step closer before catching himself. The light steadied again, and they both let out a breath. Margaret smiled faintly. "You are not like most people I meet," she said. "You are not in a rush to fill the silences." Nathan shrugged lightly. "You do not seem like someone who likes meaningless words." Her smile widened just enough to be seen in the dim light. "Maybe that is why this does not feel so bad." Outside, the thunder began to move farther away, but the rain still whispered against the building in steady waves. Inside, the hours were slipping by in a way that felt suspended, unmeasured, as if the rest of the world had stopped with them. Nathan found himself thinking about how, just 2 hours ago, she had been little more than a familiar face in the hallway. Now, she felt like someone he had known far longer. And as he looked at her, seated comfortably on the floor now, with her legs tucked to the side, he realized that what had started as an inconvenience was becoming something far harder to define. What she said next would make him wonder if the elevator breaking down had been luck in disguise. The rain outside had softened to a steady hiss, but the elevator still felt sealed off from the world. The dim emergency light buzzed faintly above them, throwing shadows that shifted when either of them moved. Nathan leaned back against the wall, his knees drawn up slightly, watching Margaret as she rested her head against the metal panel. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was not awkward silence anymore. It was the kind that carried weight, the kind that made every small movement, her breathing, the rustle of fabric as she shifted, feel amplified. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was quieter than before. When I said earlier, if we do not get out tonight, I was not really talking about elevators. Nathan met her gaze. He thought about asking what she meant, but chose instead to say, "Good." Because I was not talking about elevators either. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. She held his eyes a second longer before looking down at her hands, her fingers lightly tracing the seam of her dress. A low rumble of thunder rolled through the building. It was distant now, but it still carried enough force to make the elevator hum faintly. Margaret shifted her position, pulling one leg up and leaning her shoulder into the wall. The soft fabric of her dress slid just enough to reveal the curve of her knee in the dim light. It was unintentional, but Nathan noticed. She asked, almost hesitantly, "Do you ever think about what you would say to someone if you knew it was the last time you would see them?" Nathan paused. "Sure," he said. "I think most people do." "Exactly," she replied. "We save the important words for some perfect moment that never comes." The truth of that settled between them. Nathan leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees. "Sounds like you should say them anyway." Margaret laughed softly, shaking her head. "You make it sound so simple." "Sometimes it is," Nathan said. "People just like to make it harder than it has to be." She studied him for a long beat, as if weighing whether she believed him. Then she pushed herself up from the floor and walked to the control panel. She pressed a few buttons they both knew were dead. The panel clicked softly, but gave no other response. "Still nothing," she murmured. Nathan stayed seated, watching her in the low light. It was strange, he thought, how different she felt to him now. Just a few hours ago, she had been the quiet neighbor from upstairs. Now she was someone whose words he would remember. When she turned back, she leaned against the wall closer to him than before. Not touching, but close enough that he felt the faint shift of air when she moved. "You are not in a rush to leave, are you?" she asked. "No," Nathan said. That earned him a small, curious smile. Most people would be pacing by now, cursing, checking their phone every 2 minutes. "And you?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "I think I would usually be pretending not to be nervous. But right now, I am not pretending." There was warmth in her voice that he had not heard before. It stayed with him as they both fell quiet again. The elevator felt like its own world. No time, no obligations, no one else. Margaret tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I have lived here for 2 years," she said, "and I know less about the people in this building than I do about strangers I sit next to on a plane." "Planes make people talk," Nathan replied. "They know it is temporary." "And yet here we are," she said, "talking too much when we will definitely see each other again." "Maybe that is the point," Nathan said. "Maybe it is about finding the people you would not mind seeing more often." Her gaze lingered a moment before dropping to her lap. "You make things sound so simple." "Maybe they are," Nathan said. "We just like to complicate them." For a while, they listened to the faint creak of the cables above, the occasional shift in the elevator's frame. Nathan noticed the way her breathing slowed, her posture relaxing against the wall. Then she said, "You know, If we do not get out tonight, I am not sure I would mind. Neither would I, Nathan answered. The silence that followed was charged, almost fragile, as if one wrong word could break it. Margaret finally leaned her head back against the wall, her hair spilling over her shoulder. Nathan thought about how easily this night could have been nothing more than an inconvenience. But what was happening now felt like a moment carved out of time, and he was not ready for it to end. The storm outside had dwindled to little more than the occasional drip of water somewhere beyond the elevator shaft. The air inside was warmer now, not from the temperature, but from the slow, steady rhythm of their conversation. Margaret had shifted, so she was sitting sideways against the wall, one arm draped over her bent knee. She studied Nathan without saying much, her eyes lingering in a way that made him stop pretending to look elsewhere. "It is strange," she said at last. "I thought I would just make polite conversation until we reached the lobby." "And now?" Nathan asked. "Now I am wondering why I never took the time to talk to you before," she said. "Maybe," Nathan replied, "because the universe was saving it for tonight." She laughed softly, but she did not disagree. The quiet that followed was gentle, not awkward. The creak of the cables overhead seemed slower, as if even the building wanted to give them more time. Somewhere above, Nathan thought he heard the faint echo of footsteps, maybe the sound of tools. He did not mention it. Neither did she. They both seemed to know the moment was fragile, and once the world outside intruded, it would be gone. "You think they will have this fixed by morning?" she asked. "Probably," Nathan said. "And if they do not, then I guess we will still be here, talking." She repeated the word softly, almost to herself. Talking. Nathan felt the weight of it. They had not just traded words tonight. They had shared the kind of conversation that happens rarely, when two people stop rushing long enough to actually listen. "If we leave too soon," he said after a pause, "we might never know what else this could have been." Her eyes met his again, steady now, without hesitation. They stayed like that until the emergency light flickered once more. This time, they both knew it meant something was changing. Somewhere far above, machinery stirred. A low hum returned to the cables. Margaret's lips curved into a faint smile. "For elevator emergencies," she said, "you should probably give me your number." Nathan smiled back. "I will write it on the bread wrapper." The elevator gave a soft jolt, then began to move. Neither of them looked at the floor indicator. Instead, they kept their eyes on each other until the doors slid open. The hallway outside was quiet, the storm's scent still drifting in from a cracked window at the far end. Nathan stepped aside to let her go first, but she lingered a moment, brushing past him slowly before heading toward the stairwell. "Good night, Nathan," she said. "Good night, Margaret." The doors closed again, leaving him alone with the echo of her voice and the warm imprint of a night he knew he would remember. Sometimes, Nathan thought, life locks you in, not to trap you, but to make sure you finally notice the person standing next to you. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please share it and leave your thoughts in the comments below.